Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Well, that's not just one, that's two CNN videos in one day with the exact same topic, CNN bashing Democrats. Now, the first one was, of course, the Biden administration and their ridiculous redefinition of the term recession, or the concept, the technical definition of a recession. But this one's more the DNC, the DCCC, big money Democrat campaigning strategy, which CNN political analyst or CNN anchor John Alvin described as cynical and hypocritical. So we now have CNN openly mocking Joe Biden and the Biden administration's messaging, and now we have them condemning and slamming DNC political strategy headed into the next couple of elections. Now, this is definitely a topic that we have to cover. It's actually very interesting. So we'll play the little CNN clip. We'll try to look over all of the mud democracy January 6th garbage that he says. He doesn't realize how much of a hypocrite he is, pushing the narratives and talking points that he's pushing while condemning the Democrats for essentially doing the same thing, but we'll get into that later. We'll cover the Democrats' new election strategy headed forward. I think it's going to be a real disaster for them, a total political miscalculation, and then maybe if we have time after that, we'll get into some basic polling analysis, taking a look at the outlook of the midterm elections. Once again, we got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, take a look at this article right over here from The Blaze. CNN anchor shreds Democrats for cynical and hypocritical midterm strategy. Take a look at this.
There's a lot of righteous talk, especially from Democrats, about how we need to build the biggest possible coalition to defend democracy. Couldn't agree more. And charter members of that Profile and Courage caucus are the 10 House Republicans who voted for Trump's impeachment after the insurrectionist attack on our Capitol. Now, they've gotten a lot of praise for putting country over party, but talk is cheap. And the reality is that those brave folks, including Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, have been taking a lot of fire from left and right this year. Now, the most recent example is Congressman Peter Meijer, a young Army veteran and rising star from Michigan, a man whose independent-minded, common-sense conservative principles perfectly fit the district once held by Gerald Ford. But yesterday, with 1 week until his primary, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee decided to drop more than $400,000 ad buy in his district to boost the name ID of his Trump-backed far-right primary opponent, because they believe he'd be much easier to beat in a district that Biden won in 2020. It's incredibly cynical and hypocritical. But it's also part of a trend. Democrats trying to meddle in Republican primaries, not to aid honorable Republicans, but to try to kneecap them. It's a dangerous game to play because with the gravitational pull of midterms moving away from the president's party, there's a non-zero chance that some of the more extreme candidates could win, despite being objectively worse fits for their district. Democrats are targeting honorable outliers like Peter Meijer. Unfortunately, he's not alone. Take Adam Kinzinger and John Katko. They both voted to impeach Trump. Both represent blue states, Illinois and New York. And in that once-a-decade redistricting, Democrats essentially erased their districts. Now, they could have gone after the districts of Sedition Caucus members like Mary Miller or Elise Stefanik, but no. They saw more upside going after the few remaining centrist Republicans.
Now, you guys see exactly what I was saying in the intro. The insurrection caucus, mud democracy, garbage fear-mongering, as he condemns the Democrats for formulating a strategy around that exact topic. You know, a couple months ago when the Democrats drew out Adam Kinzinger's district entirely, we weren't catching on to what the Democrats' strategy at the time was. At first glance, it was, good job, Adam Kinzinger. You sided with Nancy Pelosi and then you got absolutely royally screwed by the Democrats right after. But now it's all coming to light. Their strategy is all coming to light. And it all boils down to one specific thing, funnily enough, the concept of ultra MAGA. Now bear with me for a second, but the Democrats are taking a very risky political gamble with their new strategy. They did all of these surveys and focus group research, and they came to the conclusion that Donald Trump and Donald Trump associated Republicans are real scary, and that concept is going to be their key to victory. Fear-mongering about Trump Republicans and the concept of ultra MAGA that they came up with. And they've devoted themselves so deeply to this political theory, the Democrats are currently trying to eliminate the districts of perceived moderate neocons, rhinos like Adam Kinzinger, while simultaneously propping up and literally donating campaign funds to the election efforts of perceived Trump Republicans. You heard that right. I've been following the reporting on this for the last couple of weeks, and it's absolutely fascinating. The DNC is donating to perceived ultra-MAGA Republicans so they can craft this image of a radical, extreme Republican Party that they can continue to fearmonger about. This whole January 6th committee thing and this whole right-wing domestic terrorism nonsense narrative that they keep propping up is actually just the beginning of their long-term strategy to cast the Republican Party in a very negative light and benefit them in the long term. And look, this isn't a conspiracy. NPR is reporting on this stuff. Why Democrats are paying for ads supporting Republican primary candidates. Democrats are buying ads supporting far-right GOP primary candidates in the hopes of facing them in the general election, a strategy that former Senator Claire McCaskill of Missouri tried in 2012. They're funneling money into Trump-endorsed candidates, thinking that it's going to help them in the short and long term. But I think they're in for a serious wake-up call when it turns out that possibly, or most likely, probably, a lot of the polling data that we currently have access to is wildly underestimating the actual popularity of Republicans in general and Republican candidates, and it leads to a scenario where ultra-MAGA takes over. They are literally helping Donald Trump and Republican voters drain the swamp, and they think it's some genius 5-head 3D chess move, or 4D chess move, whatever you want to call it, that's going to somehow benefit them in the short to long term. And they've gone as far to redraw their districts to enable Trump-endorsed ultra-MAGA candidates and to get rid of people like Adam Kinzinger, who have helped them promote this narrative. This CNN anchor is actually correct when he says that it's cynical and hypocritical. He's right when he says the Democrats are meddling. That's exactly what they're doing. But I think, again, he's severely underestimating how badly this could backfire in the Democrats' face. Just like the whole January 6th sham hearing has in the first place, the whole narrative has basically crumbled. Because you know what basic voters don't want to hear during an election season? They don't want fear-mongering and doom and gloom and all of this garbage. People want hope. But the Democrats have totally embraced cynicism, a cynical outlook, pessimism, that everything's bad and everything's the worst and our political enemies are literally Satan reincarnated. Donald Trump is literally Hitler and fascism and insurrection, democracy, blah, blah, blah. Nothing but fear-mongering, cynicism. The end is here, the sky is falling, political strategy, and it's going to backfire. People don't want that. And that's why Donald Trump was so successful, because Donald Trump was the first person in a while who wasn't campaigning off America's a deeply flawed, racist, terrible place that must be reformed and recreated. Donald Trump was saying, back to our previous glory, back to the glory days, a new age of nationalism and pride and patriotism, and of course a new age of opportunity and success and prosperity. The Democrats are pushing a narrative of existential threat and the world ending. Vote for us because big government is the only thing that could save you. That's not a winning political strategy. It's going to backfire, and I think it's going to backfire spectacularly into the 2022 midterms. The Democrats are already losing when it comes to redistricting, but now we're learning that they've redrawn districts to benefit America First candidates. They think they're going to get some upset victories. Certain matchups are going to flip in their favor, but what they don't seem to understand is that the phony push polls, at least in my opinion, are going to be very far off from what we actually see in the midterm elections. You know, a lot of people are saying that Pennsylvania is still leaning Democrat and that John Fetterman is going to carry the state. Now, Dr. Oz, or Mehmet Oz, is obviously a very weak Republican candidate, but I don't think it's going to be that easy, especially if you look at voter registration trends in Pennsylvania. Democrats at about 4 million voters, Republicans at around 3.45 million, which means Pennsylvania net difference since the 2022 election shows a GOP plus 146,000 gain in voter registration. That's 66,000 more than Biden's PA 2020 margin of victory. If we go to the suburbs, it continues to look bad for Democrats. Biden's job approval is 37% overall, but with suburban voters, that approval goes down to 33%. Whether we look at Hispanic voters, Black voters, Asian American Pacific Island voters, or Pacific Islander voters rather, voter enthusiasm and people who plan on actually showing up to the polls, who's winning on the issues, the most major issues, whether it's the economy, inflation, immigration, recession, foreign policy, you name it. Democrats are underwater. Republicans are leading on every single issue. Democrats think that they stand a chance. This is their miscalculation. Democrats have fooled themselves into thinking that their fear-mongering and their bogus narratives are sound political strategy that's working, even though it hasn't been working in practice, really, and especially not recently. And they fooled themselves into thinking, I mean, this is just my opinion, of course, we don't know what's really going to happen in the next couple of months, but they fooled themselves into thinking that the polling data is accurate, at least the stuff coming out of Politico/Morning Consult, YouGov, and other outlets. They think the election is close and that there's a whole lot of toss-ups, but I think they're going to be in for a seriously rude awakening once this red tsunami starts to really materialize and take effect once it gets close to the shore, and they're going to probably have to learn the hard way as this wave engulfs them that they've made a seriously naive political miscalculation and that their fear-mongering, garbage, phony tactics don't work anymore. You can only cry wolf so many times until people just stop believing you. And worst case scenario for the Democrats here is their possible political miscalculation backfires, ultra-mega candidates take over everywhere. It leads to an economic resurgence during Donald Trump's second term, hopefully in 2024, and they essentially created the perfect environment for red pills and wake-up calls to be handed out to the masses. Maybe those scary Republican America First candidates weren't the extremists that Democrats kept telling us they were. Maybe good energy policy and economic policy, and less Democrat socialism, is a good thing. We can only hope, we can only dream. But of course, we'll follow this and we'll have to see exactly where this political strategy leads for the Democrats. That's what I got for you guys in this video, though. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to leave a like on the video. I'm going to get back to work. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.